So here we are again. Our app now shows the list of the values we generated and the number of things we generated. On the long run, I want to have it differently. So I want to have the number, the actual number right here. And then we go into a different view screen, however you call it, where we see the history. And for that, we're going to use navigation. But before we do that, let's first make a new branch, because that is usually what we do. We just have a working version. We now go into Git, make a new branch, develop the new features in that branch, and once that works, we merge that branch back into our master branch. Now to do that, I have to get out of the way because you don't see that otherwise. Just a second. Because the important thing is happening on the left, on the down right corner. So here's our master branch. We're currently working in the master branch. We click on it. Here's our master branch. And if we scroll up a bit, we can generate a new branch. And let's call that new branch second view. And now you can see down right here, we're in the second view. And all the changes we are doing now are local to that branch. And if it's screwed up, we just check out the master branch again, delete the second branch, and nothing severe happened. So that's nice. Okay, so now let's start working in our second view branch. We want to add a button. So I want to add a button like here, which when clicked brings us to another screen where we can see all the history. So to do that, we have to do one thing in the beginning. Let's go to the main activity file and comment out that part here. This part handles some things of fragments. And if you don't comment that out, some really weird things are happening. So in the next, you've seen the video, the YouTube video, so let's do this. Go to the resource manager. Go to navigation and add our navigation resource file. And I usually call them nav graph. If you read or looked into the documentation, that is also the name the Android people usually give that file. Okay. Now you get a warning, and we just ignore that for the moment. Yes, and we want to add the new file to Git. That's nice. So you see. Okay. Now we can close that screen here again. And I can add myself again. Here we are. Now the first thing I'd like to do is add something to the project main activity XML. Because if you see in the video, you have a container which is our main video, our main fragment, and then the fragments are just put in and out again. And we have to tell the main activity that this is the host for these containers. So as a first thing, let's change that to a constraint layout. Blah, blah, blah. And now we can add into that constraint layout our nav host fragment. just put it down here. And now it tells us, okay, where is the information which fragments I have? And this is our nav graph file. We generated that one before. And now we get a little error because we did not constrain that view in the parent. So let's do that. So that looks okay. Now we can go, let's close the nav graph, and you can see here in these resources folder, we have a new folder which is called navigation. And in that navigation folder, we have our nav graph. And that's all there is at the moment. So go to the design. And you can see here some host or main activity. And now we add to that host our fragments with a new destination. And we add the fragment we already have, which is the main fragment. And here we go. And that's already it for the first step. So let's see whether it's still working. So it's still working as before. Rotation works, we're happy. Let's go back to, before we do anything else, let's save the current changes in our Git branch. And you can do that with this icon over here. So these are the files we've changed. And we commit this. Because this is a working step. And if we now screw up, we can always go back to that step. And now we can add a new fragment. Add a new destination, and that's going to be our history destination. We create a new one. And at this time, we don't need a fragment plus ViewModel because we're going to reuse that ViewModel later on. We just generate a new fragment. And we call that history fragment. And yes, we want to add these new files to Git. And here we go. No, still building model, sorry. But now we can just zoom out a bit. And here's a new fragment. We have a main fragment, and we want to go from a button click to that history fragment. And we generate that option by just pulling this one over here. Now behind all these graphics, as usual, is a plain XML file. So let's have a look at this. So the interesting thing is fragment here, first fragment, which is the main fragment, the one we programmed already. And here is our second fragment, the history fragment. And the error we added is this action here. So the ID, you have to remember that, is action main fragment to history fragment. Nice. Now we want to have this movement on the click of button. So let's add this button to our main fragment. So we head over to the, can do that exactly from here. Wait a sec. Go to design, and in the main fragment, we want to add a button. Double click on here. And here is our current view. Now we add button, place it in our constraint view, constraint layout. I don't like to have it squeezed in that corner, so now we have it a little bit distant from these corner sides. And that's it. So we change a lot now. Let's commit that to Git again. And maybe I don't want to add the changes of the adding button right now. So let's leave that one out. And here we have the new history fragment. And we commit that change. Commit anyway. And now we still have the main fragment. Let's add that in the second step to Git. And now we have to go to the main fragment. By the way, here is the history fragment. I don't like where it per default places that file, but we leave it at the moment. So we go into the main fragment. And as you can see, I made the changes so that we have view binding here. So we can go down and add a listener to a new button. Binding dot button. That's the name. We might change that afterwards. Set one-click listener. And now we want to navigate to the second view once that button is clicked. And we do that with find nav controller dot navigate r.id dot. And now we have to give the action which we've seen in the XML file, which was action main fragment to history fragment. And that's already it. At least I hope so. So let's see whether that works. Rerun our app. And here's our app with the new button. Now the question is, what happens when we click that button here? We go to the new fragment, which at the moment displays only this text here. Now the question is, how do we go back to our main fragment? We don't have a button here, but you can just directly use the back button here. And here we are again. So you can see with these few steps, we already added a navigation between two different fragments. And it keeps the state of the fragment. That's nice. So now let's give that button a better name. Wait, we now have a working version. What do we do if we have a working version? We commit it to Git. Working navigation. We are pretty happy about that. And now we can go to our main fragment and change the text which is displayed by the button. And we should change the name. Let's call that button to history. A typo in it. We refactor this. Now let's see whether that worked if we go into the main fragment. Now we have an error here. And the error is because the name of the button has changed. So the button is now called toHistory. Nice. And here we are. We can add things. We can move to the second screen. We can move back. We have a real name of the button and everything's fine. But now maybe we want to show something here despite the hello fragment thing. What we want to show is in fact the list of values we generated this far, the history. So how do we do that? Before we start, commit that changes. Change name and text. And now we go to the history fragment. Whoa, lots of default stuff which we just don't need. So let's be bold and just delete all this. And now go to our main fragment and see which of the methods we want to add here. So therefore, split and move right. So we have the view bindings, which we want to have here. But of course, we want to have the binding of the main fragment, but we want to have the binding for this fragment here. And the name is based on the layout XML file. And here it's called fragment history. So that would be fragment history binding. Fragment history binding, that's it. Then we want to have the onCreate view also using view bindings. So as before, delete that one. Move that one over. And have the fragment history binding here. And if you remember, when you did the view binding, we also have to add the onDestroyView method here. Okay. So now the question is, how do I get access to the list of previously generated values in this fragment here? And if you remember, we generated that view model so that we can persist the data even when we rotate the screen. Now that means it's kind of a sink for data which is accessed in the main fragment. And we can reuse that main view model in our new fragment. So let's copy that over here. Add our on view created method. And we have our view bindings, so we can go for a binding dot, okay, has that called? Wait, we have to go back to the fragment history XML file. And here it is called text view, and it doesn't even have an ID, so no wonder that this doesn't work. So let's design that view here. First of all, as usual, convert that to a constraint layout. Okay, let me move that over here so we can see the full design. We have our text view. And let's call that TV for text view history. Refactor it. And set the width of wrap content and the height of wrap content. Okay, now we change the ID of that text view. And we can go to our fragment and use that text view history. And set the text. We did that before, just split that again. So how do we set the text of a text field? We did that here. And now we want to have it to show the list of values we already generated. So that would be exactly the code here. So let's copy that over here and see what happens. So we generate some values, we go to the history, and here's our history. We can go back, generate some more, and here's our new history. Works nicely, looks extremely ugly. And that is what we're going to work on the next video. How can we make this display of list look nice? And as we have working code now, we put that into Git again. And remember that we're still working on our branch. So let me get out of the way again. So, okay, we don't need that error message. So we're still in our second view branch. And now we have a working version and we want to put that back into our master branch. So to do that, we go into the master branch, check this one out. And you see, there is no history fragment, there is no navigation folder. It's the state before we started with working on our branch. Now we go to a second view branch and merge the second view, the changes we made, into the version we had before. We merge the second view into master. And that's it. So you can see history fragment is here, navigation folder is here. So the master is now the state which the second view was before. But I think we came pretty far in this video. So we now added a second view. We learned how we can move to this view, and you've seen how we can get access to values we generated in the first view in that second view by this shared view model. And I would say this is pretty awesome, and we should stop here and happy coding.